I'm tired of being broke all the time. There has to be something better.
An older woman
Who could?
take care of you.
Yeah, that wouldn't be so bad.
It could solve all of our problems.
Making it with a woman.
How hard can it be?
Scene 1 of Lesbian Lover Society establishes the thematic and emotional foundation of the anthology by foregrounding questions of survival, aspiration, and the uneasy intersections between desire, care, and power that many queer women learn to navigate long before they have language for them. And it does so through the seemingly casual conversations and charged silences shared between Lexi and Veronica, two young women whose frustration with precarity becomes the narrative's entry point into a deeper exploration of longing and self-recognition. The opening dialogue about being tired of being broke operates not merely as exposition, but as an articulation of a generational anxiety that resonates strongly with women who have been socialized to equate independence with worth while simultaneously being denied the structural means to achieve it. And the offhand joking about an older woman who could take care of them immediately reveals how economic vulnerability and romantic fantasy can blur into one another in ways that feel both pragmatic and fraught. This framing is particularly resonant within queer contexts, where traditional scripts of financial stability and partnership are often inaccessible or unstable, leaving younger women to imagine alternative arrangements that promise safety, mentorship, or relief from exhaustion. When the conversation pivots toward the idea of an older woman rather than a man, the film subtly critiques heteronormative assumptions about dependency, while also refusing to romanticize the imbalance such relationships can entail, allowing the idea to linger as a possibility shaped by need rather than pure desire. The subsequent encounter with Professor Copeland introduces a new emotional register, one defined by surprise and recognition. As the authority figure's presence reframes the earlier fantasy into a lived social reality where age, experience, and institutional power are unavoidable factors. Rather than sensationalizing this dynamic, the scene focuses on the discomfort and curiosity that arise when unspoken identities are suddenly acknowledged, particularly in the moment where attraction between women is named aloud, collapsing the distance between speculation and self-awareness. Lexi's bravado about not knowing the first thing about being with a woman, and Veronica's casual dismissal of its difficulty function as defensive humor, a common strategy among queer women who have learned to mask uncertainty with confidence in order to remain legible and unthreatening. The film treats this exchange not as a joke at the character's expense, but as an honest reflection of how inexperience and desire often coexist, especially in environments where mentorship around queer intimacy is scarce or stigmatized. As the narrative returns to discussions of work and money, the idea of catering and networking underscores how young women are often encouraged to monetize their labor and personalities in the hope of proximity to opportunity, reinforcing the sense that intimacy and survival are constantly entangled. The repeated refrain that there has to be something better becomes a quiet thesis statement for the scene, encapsulating both economic frustration and emotional yearning. And it is within this space of dissatisfaction that the older woman fantasy reemerges, now tied to a specific anecdote about a wealthy married woman who relies on younger women for care and companionship. This story, relayed with a mixture of intrigue and skepticism, illustrates how queer desire is frequently discovered through rumor and secondhand narratives rather than open acknowledgement, particularly for younger women whose access to queer community is mediated by secrecy. The emphasis on dog walking and domestic routines grounds the anecdote in mundanity, resisting sensationalism, and instead highlighting how intimacy often develops through acts of care that are socially acceptable and therefore invisible. When the scene shifts to the encounter with the older woman herself, the tone becomes markedly quieter, and the film's restraint is especially evident in its focus on conversation, eye contact, and pauses rather than overt action. The older woman's gratitude for help, and her confession about an unhappy marriage, situate her not as an object of conquest but as a complex individual whose own dissatisfaction mirrors that of the younger women, suggesting a continuum of longing that transcends age. Her redirection of the conversation away from her husband and toward Lexi's inner life signals a desire for recognition rather than validation. And this shift underscores one of the scene's central concerns, the hunger to be seen as more than useful or attractive. The questions about school, focus, and relationships create a space where Lexi can articulate her emotional confusion, And her admission of interest in another girl who does not reciprocate resonates as a universal queer experience, one marked by uncertainty and the fear of misreading signals in a world that rarely offers clear affirmation. The older woman's reassurance, emphasizing Lexi's beauty and worth, functions as both comfort and risk, illustrating how affirmation from someone with greater confidence and experience can feel profoundly stabilizing while also carrying the weight of influence. The scene carefully navigates this tension by allowing Lexi's nervousness to remain visible, acknowledging the vulnerability inherent in being desired by someone who seems to possess answers. The revelation that the older woman also likes women is delivered without spectacle, framed instead as a moment of quiet honesty that collapses the imagined distance between mentor and peer, and this choice reinforces the film's commitment to portraying lesbian connection as grounded in recognition rather than transgression. The repeated apologies that follow are particularly striking, as they suggest an awareness of boundaries and the ethical complexity of the situation, reminding the viewer that desire alone does not absolve responsibility. These apologies are not framed as guilt for feeling, but as care for the other person's emotional safety, a distinction that aligns with the film's broader emphasis on ethical intimacy. Throughout the scene, physicality is implied rather than described, allowing the emotional stakes to take precedence and inviting viewers to focus on the internal shifts occurring within the characters as they negotiate attraction, hesitation, and trust. This approach is especially important given the cultural tendency to sensationalize age gap relationships between women or to dismiss them as fantasy, and by centering emotional dialogue, the film challenges these patterns, insisting on nuance and respect. The dynamic between Lexi and Veronica remains an important undercurrent, as their earlier conversations about money and possibility contextualize Lexi's openness to the older woman, highlighting how peer relationships can both enable and complicate individual choices. Veronica's role as confidant and co-dreamer reflects how queer women often process desire collectively, using friendship as a testing ground for fantasies that feel too risky to explore alone. The scene invites lesbian viewers to recognize familiar strategies of negotiation, such as joking to deflect vulnerability, framing desire as practical, or seeking guidance from those perceived as more experienced. And in doing so, it validates these behaviors as responses to structural pressures rather than personal failings. For women more broadly, the narrative speaks to the exhaustion of emotional labor and the longing for someone else to carry the weight, even temporarily. And it questions whether such relief can ever be disentangled from power. The film does not offer easy answers, instead presenting the encounter as a moment of becoming, where all parties glimpse parts of themselves that have been constrained by expectation. The older woman's confession about running a business with an absent partner mirrors the younger woman's frustration with financial dependence, suggesting that patriarchy's promises of stability often fail women across generations, leaving them to seek connection and care in each other. This intergenerational resonance adds depth to the scene, positioning lesbian relationships as potential sites of solidarity and understanding rather than mere escape. The careful pacing allows each emotional beat to land, reinforcing the idea that intimacy develops through listening and presence rather than performance. By resisting explicitness, the film aligns itself with a tradition of queer storytelling that values interiority and ethical complexity, offering viewers an experience that feels reflective rather than consumptive. The scene's conclusion, marked by repeated expressions of regret and acknowledgement, underscores the ongoing process of negotiating boundaries, reminding viewers that self-recognition is rarely linear and often accompanied by uncertainty. In framing this encounter as part of a larger anthology about lesbian society, the film situates individual desire within communal contexts, suggesting that personal choices reverberate beyond the self and contribute to shared understandings of what is possible. The narrative invites audiences to consider how economic vulnerability, mentorship, and attraction intersect in their own lives, and how these intersections are shaped by social norms that alternately erase and fetishize women's relationships with each other. By treating these themes with seriousness and care, Scene 1 establishes Lesbian Lover Society as a cultural text committed to honoring the complexity of queer women's experiences, insisting that their stories are worthy of nuance and ethical consideration. Ultimately, the scene is not about provocation, but about the quiet courage it takes to articulate desire, to listen with intention, and to recognize oneself in another, even when doing so reveals uncomfortable truths. It affirms that becoming visible to oneself is an ongoing process shaped by relationships, context, and care, and that within a world still uneasy with women loving women, such moments of recognition are both deeply personal and profoundly political.